Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joel Cuello, Professor of Biosystems Engineering at the University of Arizona. Today, I'm joined by Marc Oshima, who is the Chief Marketing Officer and also co-founder at AeroFarms. Good afternoon, Marc, and welcome.
Well, thank you. Great to be with you, Joel, and great to be able to share our story and be able to connect with your audience.
Yes. So Marc, AeroFarms was founded in 2004. So this year actually marks the 18th year anniversary of the company. And I want to ask you first this question, because you've been there since the beginning. What are you most proud about AeroFarms, with everything that you've gone through in the last 18 years?
Yeah, well, the thing that's really guided us has been the fact that we are mission driven, right? And so our mission and focus is how do we grow the best plants possible for the betterment of humanity? And that has really served as our North Star in terms of guiding us and thinking about the business, how we've grown the business, how we've evolved, and how we thought about first around, local production and enabling that through our own technology, but then thinking about the broader growing platform that we've developed and how we can help solve broader agriculture supply chain needs. So for us, it's been thinking about always as our mission about the impact we can have and how we're building not only our company, but we're building an industry, we're building a movement, and we've been excited to be at the forefront of this.
Right. And certainly you're at the forefront of it together with just a few companies. So there's no denying, there's no question that AeroFarms is one of the leading vertical farming companies in this industry, and not just in the United States, but globally. So can you please explain to us a little bit more in terms of the strategies of AeroFarms, be it technology, be it business, that enabled AeroFarms to occupy this position and to maintain it over the years?
Yeah, well, the idea, and it really starts with the three co-founders. And so when we think about this idea of farming, it's a reminder, it's really challenging. It's really hard to do, and it really takes a village and takes a lot of expertise to be able to come together. Right. And so the initial foundation, my fellow co-founder and CEO, David Rosenberg, is a clean tech champion, really reimagining how do we do more with less. Very involved with leading the circular economy. That's part of our whole design and thesis. And so absolutely big in terms of, again, thinking about the kind of broader impact we want to have as an organization. And then Dr. Ed Harwood, who is our Chief Science Officer, who really developed our pioneering technology and really thought about differently around distributed farming and the impact we could have in leveraging technology. And so leveraging the work he was doing at Cornell University and thinking about helping farmers, and leveraging his background in dairy sciences and thinking about, again, sanitation and sanitary design and thinking about food safety and having that be integral to our design. My background, as you mentioned, is on the marketing side. And so I've headed the marketing for supermarket chains, specialty food retailers. I have a real passion around food and the power of food what power can do, food can do to bring people together. But it's really important thinking about, what is it that we're growing? What is it that were our strategies in terms of our go-to-market? And so we've had a very different philosophy in terms of coming together and thinking about the kind of impact, the kind of crops that we're going to grow, where are the pain points? How do we partner effectively with different selling channels and different partners? And then that's been the foundation, but we've been fortunate. We have a world, class team of experts. So we talk about, how many farms, not only do they have a chief science officer, but a chief technology officer, right? Our head of R&D is coming from the world of CPG, where she'd been focusing on commercializing, products. And so this lens is really important in terms of like driving, it's not research just for R&D purposes, but how do we drive commercial businesses? Our head of operations, his background has been in, leading plants and facilities all over the world, responsible for over 30,000 employees. So the idea is large scale impact. When we think about, again, how do we build more of these farms and where we put them? And then the head of our chief people officer, she came to us from Google. So the idea of culture and has been really important in terms of, again, how do we build our team? How do we ensure alignment? How do we build that culture? And then underpinning all of this has been our CFO, who is coming to us from the world of renewable energy. So this idea of distributed energy, distributed food production, really a lot of synergies and thinking about the right kind of financing, project financing, expertise. So when we talk about how we can all come together, this is about how do you build the right business plan that can be able to grow, with the vision that we've had, but also be able to adapt. And so we've had different chapters of the company in different areas of focus, and it's been able to open up more doors of opportunity for us.
And that makes perfect sense because a business really has a lot of these facets, and every one of those needs to be taken care of. And you certainly have the best people to take care of each one of those facets of the business as a holistic enterprise or business. Now, I know you are on the marketing side, but I want to ask you a little bit about your R&D.
Yeah, sure.
AeroFarms, of course, has that 5,500 square foot R&D facility or farm. Could you tell us what aspects of vertical farming are being looked into in terms of R&D in that facility? For instance, are you doing research on artificial intelligence, automation, robotics, and so on and so forth?
Yeah. So Joel, yeah, that's excellent question. So we just have opened the doors for our new AgX facility in Abu Dhabi.
Yes.
That is at 55,000 square feet, the world's largest indoor vertical farm just for R&D, right?
Okay.
And this is building on our history of commercial growing R&D, but this is really thinking about, again, how we extend the expertise we have in our growing platform.
Right.
This particular facility is looking at 5 key centers of excellence, thinking about speed breeding, organoleptic, sensory, thinking about the next generation in AI and machine vision and machine learning, thinking about drones and automation. So these are things that are really critical when we think about ag tech and driving, what's going to be the next thing for a step evolution. We're really excited about things like the speed breeding, high value nurseries, where we can extend expertise not only for indoor farming, but then extend it into the broader commercial agriculture community. So thinking about more resilient crops that can do well in the face of climate change.
Right. Yes. So the AeroFarms AgX that was established in Abu Dhabi is really exciting. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But going back to what you're doing as a company, are you deliberately growing as well your technology portfolio in terms of IP, intellectual property?
Yeah, so when we think about areas of differentiation and what makes AeroFarms unique, all of our technology has been developed in-house, and this idea of creating and thinking about the right system and right approach, depending on the plant or the variety.
Yeah.
And so what you see behind me is what we've optimized for short stem leafy greens and herbs to be able to maximize the production, the design, the airflow, and ultimately the yield and quality. But yeah, we have over 200 different IP disclosures. We have key patents in key areas of points of difference. When we talk about aeroponics, and the Aero and AeroFarms refers to that, we have certain key patents around our growing medium that have really been core to a very elegant design. So our patents are around our growing medium as a cloth, which is give us a lot of flexibility in terms of the breadth of crops we can grow. So that's really important in terms of thinking about being market driven and dynamic in terms of being able to adapt. But also that cloth is very lightweight versus dirt or water or sitting pond. And so we think about the structure, there's been a lot of elements in terms of that structural design. And then the cloth has been reusable. So those are key things that we've been public with, certainly with patents, but we also have a lot of trade secrets. But the IP portfolio has been a really important part of points of differentiation.
Okay, that's excellent. So, Marc, there's been some sort of consensus within the industry that unfortunately there are some segments of the industry that are into greenwashing. But AeroFarms, of course, I know is quite particular about fostering sustainability in your operation. So please tell us how AeroFarms is going about addressing environmental sustainability and in particular energy.
Sure. Well, let me just start when we talk about the history, and I talked a little bit about the background in terms of certainly the expertise. Certainly, our CEO David Rosenberg has brought to the forefront here the circular economy, the idea of how to do more with less, how to eliminate waste. He was very involved with the World Economic Forum. He helped found the global circular task force for this global task force for the circular economy. And so this has really been built into our DNA as an organization in terms of every design thesis, as well as the impact we have. We were one of the first with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation Circular Economy 100 to be able to join and be able to be part of a bigger movement. And then we were thinking very closely in terms of our impact within the UN and Sustainable Development Goals. Out of the 17, we directly impact 12. But then we're thinking even more specifically, again, how do we have a scorecard? And so we are a certified B corporation.
Yeah.
So there's a scorecard on how we're doing both on those environmental factors as well as societal factors. And this is really important because traditional farming metrics, whether it's organic or even this new movement with regenerative, just don't go far enough in terms of thinking about, again, all the different impact. And so the farm worker, farm welfare, the idea of fair wages, benefits, year-round employment are really important. So this is how we think we address from a transparency and openness in terms of having the scorecard. When we talk about growing with up to 95% less water, versus the field, even 40% less than hydroponics or deep water raft, we're able to assess our specific footprint, versus the competition. You mentioned about energy, right?
Yeah.
And so energy is a key area. So when I talked about having a chief technology officer, Roger Bulow, who leads that,
Right.
he's formerly a CTO of a publicly traded LED company and formerly of GE Lighting. So we have even designed our own LED array to be more energy efficient. And then we thought about this idea of marriage. I mean, we're truly the only commercial grower since 2009 that's been growing exclusively with LED lights. And so this interaction, between, obviously the biology and the lights and the usage, we have a lot of history there that's allowed us to think very carefully about what's the right spectrum, intensity, and frequency, so that we've been able to be much more judicious, we think, with our energy usage. And then today, energy is less than 10% of our cost of goods. So between lighting and environmental controls, it's not the key defining aspect, but again, we're excited to be able to think about how we can be even more efficient because of the expertise we have around that.
And that's wonderful. Yeah. But what about the use of renewable energy?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, our CFO comes from the world of solar and renewable energy. This is something that we look at for every single project in terms of what role, not only renewable, but also alternative energy. So can we do things like cogen, and using natural gas can be more efficient? So we have a pretty elaborate, criteria that when we think about siting, it's 1,000 pages and has key elements in terms of the market dynamics, but also in terms of key infrastructure around energy. So we are constantly looking at, where we can maybe potentially be able to integrate. And so we're looking at projects, that we see some future opportunities. Today, we're not currently using anything.
Okay. So next week, Mark, I'll be in New York City. I'll be joining the delegates for the Indoor Ag Tech conference, and I'll be moderating a session on the genetics and breeding of seeds that are specifically for vertical farming applications. To the extent possible, can you please describe to us how AeroFarms is sourcing its seeds for its various crops? And are you already using seeds that have been bred specifically for vertical farming?
So great question. As you can imagine, quite a bit of proprietary information around the seed and again, the sourcing. But I will say, this is an area that we see in terms of how do we help move the entire industry. So for example, we've been very involved with the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. We're one of the founding members of their PIP consortium, the Precision Indoor Plants Consortium, which is a multinational coalition coming together to solve these broader ag supply chain needs, specifically looking at key categories. So in the category of leafy greens and lettuces, AeroFarms is actually the principal investigator looking at the next generation for seed and genetic optimization. And so our lens and our prior lens of working with FAR before, as well as publishing this information for the benefit of the broader industry. And so Dr. Sanad Gordon, who leads that as our principal investigator, is really key in terms of thinking about the right sort of selection and optimization for the next generation of seeds that are going to do well in the indoor growing environment. So very actively involved in that, recognize that's really the next opportunity. What's been exciting though is because of our ability to take any seed and think about what we're able to do from a phenotyping, controlling the environment, getting the plant to express itself, it's given us a lot of independence in thinking about that future in terms of where we want to go. Okay. But we definitely see how to take it further is thinking about the next seed and seed genetics. And so some of our work that we've done, we've published or publicized that we did help develop one of the first CRISPR lettuces that help improve shelf life. So it's something that we're very actively involved in and thinking about what's needed for next generation production.
Right. Mark, last year, AeroFarms was planning on becoming a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ exchange, and this was through a planned merger with Spring Valley Acquisition Corporation, which is a special purpose acquisition company, but it did not transpire. So could you please explain to us what happened? And also going forward, is AeroFarms also thinking of going public at some point in the future?
Yeah. So this was an opportunity in thinking about how much demand there is for the work we've been doing, both the commercial as well as the R&D, and how could we help fuel that growth. The opportunity with Spring Valley first started with an alignment around vision and values. They had a real investment thesis around that sustainability as well. We've been fortunate. That's been a hallmark of us when we think about our investor base, has been long-term impact investors that we've been really aligned with the kind of vision and shared vision. We saw this as an opportunity with the markets to be able to think about, again, how can we grow and accelerate that growth? Unfortunately, the SPAC market and then the entire cloud, and it was independent of us, really collapsed in terms of as a financing vehicle. And so we actually made the decision. It went all the way to the final end where it was approved, and we made the decision as a management team, as a leadership team, not to proceed further. Because what happened is that with the SPAC, there's an investment where there was the key investors who put in what's called the PIPE in terms of building a base of investment dollars. They had an ability to redeem at the last minute, and there was nervousness about what was happening in the overall financial market and what was happening specifically with the SPAC vehicle. And what happened was that there was a higher level of redemption. So the amount of money that we thought we would be raising did not materialize. It was still, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yes.
Very meaningful and very validating in terms of, again, fundamental belief in what we're doing.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening is that it ended up being very expensive cost of capital then, because what didn't go away, the fees for the lawyers, the fees for the banks, and that would have been very expensive for us to consummate that. So we made a decision not to. It turned out to be very prescient because the market has continued to be very challenged, even more challenged from that standpoint. And part of it was that, we saw in our discussions and doing the roadshows that we did, was just an incredible healthy appetite, from the private market. So we're well positioned in terms of what we think is ahead of us. And, in terms of what could be next, it could be in terms of, again, we feel like we're 100% public readiness because we've already gone through the routine of getting ready up into that final stage.
Right. So when the right conditions manifest themselves, then you would consider it again.
Yeah, and it's really about, again, how do you grow in a capital efficient way, right? And so for us, it's been a long-term view about thinking about how do we scale, and then how do we make this sure that the business can endure in the right way.
Okay, so now let's go international, and you already mentioned about AeroFarms AgX, which is in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, and you explained a little bit that it's a research center, and I understand that it's a fully owned subsidiary of AeroFarms. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes,
that's correct.
So tell us what you think would be the medium-term or the long-term goal of AeroFarms in having that research center in Abu Dhabi.
Well, one is a great partner in the Abu Dhabi Investment Office and thinking about this broader region, the broader ag tech opportunity in terms of creating this nexus of innovation. And we think that obviously if we can address growing in a completely challenging growing environment and think about the specific crops that are needed for that, it allows us to think, again, how do we tailor our products and technology to be able to serve a much broader audience. But the idea that we're doing R&D, I mean, that's an area where, we've been public about, for example, with Cargill, we're growing the cacao. And so we're actually working on, not only the next generation crops, but the idea that these crops can be part of high value nurseries that then go out into the field. It's exciting to think about, again, the applications and extension of the work that we're trying to do.
Right. Okay, wonderful. So staying with the United Arab Emirates or the UAE, AeroFarms was conferred the Global Prosperity Award by the UAE last November. Can you tell us what that award was for?
Yeah, it's really about this idea of this marriage of corporate social responsibility, leading technology, innovation. And then as part of that, we actually have served as a mentor for 4 different companies. And so it's been exciting to think about wearing that mantle from a thought leadership and leadership standpoint to be able to share our best practices or our lessons learned with these other emerging companies as well. And that's the idea in terms of how do we foster a broader, more prosperous ecosystem from that standpoint. And so that's an exciting sort of representation of work we're doing there. We also just hosted in May the Ag Tech Innovation Summit that was really focusing on key players, particularly for that region. This is an annual event that was our inaugural event that we just hosted, but we're going to be doing this every year. And the idea is how do we convene and help be able to, as I mentioned, this ecosystem, how do we help foster a broader coming together as an industry to help solve these bigger challenges that we have ahead of us?
Right. I'm really glad that AeroFarms is into taking very seriously its corporate social responsibility and, CSR, because vertical farming really, in my view, is a natural for corporate social responsibility. So I'm glad that you're spearheading in the industry, taking that seriously and playing your role accordingly. So now, what advice would you give startup companies in this field? AeroFarms is a colossus in the vertical farming space or industry, but based on the accumulated experience and wisdom that you've had in the past 18 years, what sort of advice would you give startup companies in this space?
Yeah, well, it's more about fundamentals in terms of what problem are you trying to solve? How do you uniquely solve that and create these, competitive moats of differentiation? That's really important when you think about the reason for being. And then the problem solution is so critical in thinking about what's going to drive the right business model. But what's critical is the right mindset, right? And it's one of resiliency because, again, with any emerging business, there are going to be some zigs and zags. And so again, what can be that North Star? As I mentioned, for us, it's been about that mission and the vision about how do we bring that to life. And so I think for the companies that are entering the space, it's to appreciate there's a tremendous urgency right now, right? We need multiple people coming together and thinking differently about how do we solve these issues. They're more pressing than ever before. But I think if we all act with that same sense of urgency, that same sense of responsibility, we can all make a big difference there.
All right. Marc, do you feel optimistic about the role that the vertical farming industry is playing, within the entire food production landscape?
Yeah, so I feel incredibly optimistic about what vertical farming is doing. And one of the things that we can see is a very tangible representation of that, if you will, is the upcoming Farm Bill here in the United States. And so I had a chance to testify in front of Congress it's about 2.5 months ago, but was representing CEA and urban farming. But I can guarantee you that we worked on the previous 2 farm bills and we were never given this opportunity. And so it really signals a sea change in terms of what's happening. And so we think vertical farming can help be one of the solutions, and certainly can help be a catalyst for further innovation that can then extend to the field as well. So we think vertical farming is going to be critical from a technology and innovation standpoint.
Right.
We also think it's going to be critical from a food safety standpoint. And so this is one of the things that when we think about the challenges, I've been on the FDA Romaine Advisory Task Force for the last few years, where there've been a lot of issues with field recalls of the romaine. And here, with the indoor growing and the indoor vertical farming, we can be able to track and trace from seed to package everything that's going into the growing process, and really be able to ensure a safer process that we can then be able to track. So I think food safety is also going to be a critical thing when we think about the long-term importance of this category as well.
Right. Well, Marc, thank you so much. And thank you for that congressional testimony that you gave, certainly on behalf of AeroFarms, but also on behalf of the vertical farming industry. I think that's very important, so that the hope is that they could consider the vertical farming industry and its contribution, again, to the entire food production landscape, and then roll that into their legislation for the benefit of the industry, as well as the other part of the food production landscape. So, Marc, thank you so much for joining me today. And we wish AeroFarms, of course, all the best going forward.
Yeah, Joel, thank you so much, and appreciate the opportunity to share the AeroFarms story.
Thank you.